Okay, so have you heard about this? It's pretty wild.
What's that?
It's about dire wolves.
Oh, yeah.
You know those like creatures that used to roam North America?
Yeah.
Total icons of, a bygone era,
What?
lost world. But the crazy thing is there's all this buzz that they might be back.
No way, really?
Yeah, it's because of this company called Colossal Biosciences.
Oh, wow. I've heard of them, yeah.
They're doing some pretty groundbreaking stuff like we've seen in reports from places like ABC News.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's causing quite a stir.
I bet. So what's the deal with these dire wolves? Are they actually back?
That's what we're going to dive into today. This is going to be a deep dive straight into the science, all the implications of this claim from
Hmm.
Colossal Biosciences that they've basically revived the dire wolf.
Yeah, you might remember their work. They had those ambitious goals with the woolly mammoth a while back.
Right.
And now they've just announced they have 3 pups that they say are a huge step towards bringing back this extinct species.
Yeah, 3 pups. They were born in late 2024 and early 2025.
Wow, so brand new. Super new. And get this, their names are Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi.
Oh, wow. I see what they did there.
Right. The names are like a story in themselves.
Totally. Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, the legend says they were raised by a wolf.
Oh, right.
And then
Exactly.
Khaleesi, straight out of Game of Thrones, where those dire wolves are like major symbols.
Oh, yeah. Huge symbols. It's like they mashed up ancient history with pop culture, and boom, you've got these pups.
I love it. Okay, so how did they do it? What's the science behind this whole thing?
Well, it all starts with the gray wolf.
Okay.
See, Colossal, they're basing their work on the gray wolf's DNA because, get this, the two species share about 99.5% of their genetic code.
Really, that much?
That close. So that's where they started, this close genetic connection. And then their chief scientist, Beth Shapiro, she's explained that they've been using some seriously high-tech stuff, gene editing technology.
Oh, wow. So they're going in and making like targeted changes to the DNA. Exactly. It's like they have these super precise tools and they can zero in on specific genes in the gray wolf's DNA, especially the ones they think are behind all the cool traits that made direwolf so unique.
I see. So they're basically tweaking the gray wolf DNA to be more like a dire wolf.
That's it. They're introducing what they're calling direwolf versions of DNA into these gray wolf cells.
That's so cool. So, like, how do they actually make the pups then?
Well, once they have these cells with the tweaked DNA, they use them to create embryos.
Okay.
And then those embryos are implanted into surrogate dogs.
Oh, so they have dog moms carrying these dire wolf embryos.
That's right. And Colossal has been very clear about how they handle the surrogate moms. They were all adopted out afterwards through a humane society.
That's good. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to do this ethically and make sure the animals are treated well throughout the whole process.
Makes sense. So, if everything goes to plan, what does a successful dire wolf revival look like to them?
That's a good question. Shapiro, she has a pretty interesting way of defining success. She said that if these pups grow up to look like a direwolf, act like a direwolf, and this is a big one, if they can fill the ecological role of a direwolf,
Right.
then they call it a revival.
So, like, what does filling the ecological role actually mean?
It's about more than just, looking the part. It's about understanding the whole picture of how direwolves use to interact with their environment. What do they prey on? How do they affect other predators? How do they contribute to the whole ecosystem, even down to things like nutrient cycling? It's a pretty big picture view.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I'm guessing not everyone in the science world is on board with this, right?
You're right. There's definitely been a lot of debate and discussion in the scientific community about this whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Like, for example, there's this wolf expert, Dr. Julie Meechan.
Okay.
Back in 2021, she actually co-authored a paper with Beth Shapiro,
Oh, wow. With the same Beth Shapiro from Colossal.
the one and only. And in that paper, they concluded that dire wolves and gray wolves actually diverged, like split off on different evolutionary paths millions of years ago.
Millions of years. That's a long time.
Oh, yeah. And that separation, it means more than just time. It means there were probably some major differences that developed between the two species, like in their skeletons, their hunting techniques, maybe even how they socialized and interacted with each other. Things that might not be totally captured just by looking at the 99.5% of DNA they share with modern gray wolves.
Yeah, that makes sense. If they've been evolving separately for millions of years, there are going to be some significant differences.
Exactly. And Meechan, while she totally acknowledges that making these pups is a huge technical achievement, She's still pretty skeptical about calling them true dire wolves.
That's interesting. So what does she think they are?
She's pretty straightforward about it. She said, and I quote, "I don't think they're actually dire wolves. I don't think what we have is dire wolves. What we had is something new. We have a mostly gray wolf that looks like a dire wolf."
Oh, wow. So like a hybrid of sorts.
Kind of. And this brings up a really fundamental question. What does it even mean to revive an extinct species?
Right. What are we really talking about here?
Exactly. Meechan's point really highlights that even with all this super advanced gene editing, what they've created might be more accurately described as like a genetically modified gray wolf that just happens to have some of the physical characteristics of a dire wolf.
So is this just a semantics debate, or is there something more to it?
I think it's more than just semantics. It's about understanding the limitations of what we can actually do with these technologies and being realistic about the outcomes. It's also worth noting, though, that despite their differing interpretations of this whole thing, Meechan and Shapiro are still collaborating on research related to dire wolves.
Oh, really? So they can disagree and still work together. That's cool.
Yeah, it just goes to show that science is often about collaborating and moving forward, even when there are different ways of looking at the data.
Makes sense. So we've talked about the what and the science, but what about the why? What's driving Colossal to do this in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's get into that.
It's a huge undertaking.
So Colossal's CEO, Ben Lamb, he's been pretty upfront about this. He said that their company is, first and foremost, a technology development company. They're not just like a nonprofit research group or something.
Interesting. So there's a business angle to this.
Oh, for sure. And that distinction is important because it hints that they might have plans to turn these technologies into commercial applications down the road.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And it's not just about the science. They've definitely caught the attention of some big names and big investors.
Like who?
We're talking Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, Paris Hilton, even Peter Jackson.
Wow, that's quite a lineup.
Right. That kind of backing says a lot about the public interest in this whole de-extinction thing. Maybe even some appeal to the entertainment factor or just the sheer wow factor of it all.
I can see that. It's definitely a headline-grabbing idea. But are they doing anything else besides the dire wolves?
Yeah, actually. Colossal's involved in a bunch of other projects too.
Like what?
Well, there's the cloning work they're doing with the red wolf, which is critically endangered right now.
Oh, wow. So they're trying to save existing species, too.
Right. And they're also working on this thing called the woolly mouse.
A woolly mouse. Okay, now I'm really curious.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But these projects, they all seem to point to this bigger goal Colossal has. They want to use their gene editing skills for conservation.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's like using this high-tech stuff to try and undo some of the damage that's been done.
Exactly. Beth Shapiro has talked about this a lot, about how their de-extinction technology could be a major tool in saving threatened species and even helping to restore damaged ecosystems.
So like a way to turn back the clock on some of the extinctions we've caused.
Yeah, that's the idea. And there's even a real-world example of this in action. The state of North Dakota, they've actually invested in Colossal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, specifically to get their help in saving their bison population, which is facing a lot of challenges.
That's really interesting. So they're going from mammoths to dire wolves to bison. What's next?
Well, get this. Ben Lamb, he's even hinted that their technologies could someday have applications in human healthcare.
Whoa, that's a whole other level.
I know, right? It's a pretty big leap from bringing back extinct animals to, like, treating human diseases, but it shows how much they believe in the potential of this gene editing stuff they're doing.
Yeah, if they can do all this with animals, who knows what they could achieve in medicine. So it sounds like the motivations behind this project are pretty diverse.
Oh, definitely. It's not just about bringing back some cool extinct animal for the heck of it. It's about technological innovation, exploring potential business opportunities, and engaging with this growing need to find new ways to deal with the biodiversity crisis we're facing.
And that brings up another important question, right? What about the ethics of all this?
Right, exactly. What are some of the ethical and ecological things we need to consider when we're talking about this kind of work?
Like, what are the potential downsides? Could this stuff backfire somehow?
Yeah, there are definitely concerns. And Dr. Robert Klitzman, a bioethicist and geneticist at Columbia University, he's raised some really important points of caution.
Okay, what does he say?
Well, he stresses that whenever we mess with genes, there's always a chance for unintended consequences. Like, we might accidentally create organisms that could have negative effects on the environment that we didn't see coming.
So like invasive species 2.0.
Kind of. He even talks about the possibility of creating super wolves, which is, a bit of a scary thought.
Yeah, that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but not in a good way.
Right. But Klitzman, he's not totally against this kind of work. He has a more nuanced view. He's more open to it when the species we're talking about was driven to extinction by humans and when there's a suitable and sustainable wild environment for them to be reintroduced to.
So, like, making amends for our past mistakes and giving these animals a second chance.
That's the idea. But then you have Beth Shapiro, and she pushes back against some of these concerns by saying that there are risks to not using these technologies too.
How so?
Well, her argument is that we're facing this massive loss of biodiversity right now, and doing nothing is also going to have serious negative consequences for the planet's ecosystems.
So it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation.
Yeah, it's a tough call. And then you have Julie Meechan, who brings up this really important point about priorities and resources.
Okay, what's her take?
She asks whether all the money and effort being poured into de-extinction projects wouldn't be better spent on protecting the endangered species that are still around today.
That's a valid point. It's like, should we be focusing on the past or the present?
Right. And her question about whether this is all purely for entertainment purposes really gets to the heart of the debate about what our conservation focus should be.
It's a tough one. There's definitely a lot to think about here.
Absolutely. And speaking of things to think about, there was actually another big story happening around the same time as this dire wolf announcement.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
It was all over the news about the stock market and those tariffs that the Trump administration put in place.
Oh, right, those tariffs. I remember hearing about those.
Yeah, there was this article in Vox that went into a lot of detail about how the tariffs were affecting the stock market.
Okay, what were they saying?
Well, they were reporting on how the Dow Jones Industrial Average, one of the major stock market indices, had dropped by like more than 4,000 points since the tariffs went into effect.
Wow, 4,000 points. That's a huge drop.
It was a big deal. And the article, it even compared this market volatility to what we saw at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's pretty serious. So what was causing this drop?
The Vox article went into some of the predictions from economists, and they were saying that these tariffs could lead to some negative consequences, like higher prices for consumers on a whole range of goods and a slowdown in economic growth overall.
So like a ripple effect throughout the economy.
Exactly. And they also brought up the possibility of this escalating into a global trade war, because other countries like China, they've said they might put retaliatory tariffs in place.
Oh, that wouldn't be good. So it sounds like these tariffs were causing a lot of uncertainty and tension.
Definitely. And the article even mentioned that there were some bipartisan efforts in the Senate to try and limit the president's power to impose tariffs on his own.
So it was a pretty big political issue too then.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it's important to understand that this is a totally separate issue from the dire wolf story. I just wanted to give you a little glimpse into what else was happening in the world around the same time, just to show how complex and interconnected everything is.
Yeah, it's good to have that context. It's easy to get caught up in one story and forget that there's a whole world of stuff going on at the same time.
Right. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a quick look back at what we've covered. We started with Colossal Bioscience's announcement that they've successfully bred these pups that they believe are a major step towards bringing back the dire wolf.
And we talked about how the scientific community has been reacting to this news, with some people being pretty skeptical about whether these pups are really dire wolves or just a genetically modified version of gray wolves.
Right, and we also dug into Colossal's motivations for taking on this project, from advancing technology and exploring business possibilities to potentially making a difference in conservation.
And we explored the big ethical and ecological questions that come up when we're talking about manipulating genes and potentially bringing back extinct species. It's complicated stuff.
It really is. But hopefully you've come away from this with a better understanding of this whole dire wolf revival story, and you don't feel totally lost in the science or the different viewpoints.
It's a lot to take in, but it's important to engage with these complex topics and understand the different perspectives at play.
Exactly. And it shows you that even a news story that seems pretty straightforward can actually open up a whole bunch of scientific, ethical, and practical questions that we need to grapple with.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that the world is full of nuance and complexity. There are rarely easy answers.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to consider. With all these scientific advances we've been discussing and all the debates about how we should be using them, what do you think the main focus of conservation efforts should be in the 21st century? And how do you see things like gene editing and de-extinction fitting into that bigger picture? It's something to think about as we move forward in this era of incredible scientific possibilities.
It's a huge question, and there's no one right answer, but it's a conversation we need to keep having.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.